Question 1. Comparative studies suggest that organizations struggle to maintain a consistent security posture when employees adopt new mobile devices and applications outside of IT's direct management. Considering the capabilities of VMware Workspace 121, which approach best addresses the challenge of securing corporate data and ensuring compliance across a diverse and evolving endpoint landscape. Option A. Implement a comprehensive unified endpoint management strategy through Workspace ONE, enforcing granular policies for device enrollment, application provisioning, and data access controls, while leveraging intelligence-driven security features for proactive risk mitigation. Option B. Enforce a strict policy prohibiting the use of any unapproved mobile devices or applications for business purposes, with severe penalties for noncompliance. Option C. Focus security efforts exclusively on corporate-issued devices, disregarding the security implications of employees using personal devices for work-related tasks. Option D. Rely primarily on traditional network-level security controls and firewalls, assuming that mobile devices and applications will not introduce significant new risks to the corporate network. The correct answer is A. Implement a comprehensive unified endpoint management strategy through Workspace ONE, enforcing granular policies for device enrollment, application provisioning, and data access controls, while leveraging intelligence-driven security features for proactive risk mitigation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT environments, balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the operational demands of user productivity and device accessibility. The introduction of new mobile devices and applications by employees, often without explicit IT approval, creates a shadow IT landscape. This landscape is inherently risky, as it bypasses established security controls and compliance monitoring, potentially exposing sensitive corporate data to unauthorized access or loss. The professional challenge lies in implementing a Workspace ONE strategy that effectively addresses these risks without unduly hindering legitimate business operations or alienating users. Careful judgment is required to select solutions that are both technically sound and aligned with organizational policies and regulatory expectations. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves leveraging Workspace ONE capabilities for comprehensive device and application management, focusing on a unified endpoint management strategy. This includes establishing clear policies for device enrollment, application provisioning, and data access controls. By enforcing these policies through Workspace ONE, IT can gain visibility into all managed devices and applications, regardless of their origin. This allows for the consistent application of security baselines, such as mandatory encryption, strong authentication, and regular patching. Furthermore, Workspace ONE intelligence-driven security features, like Workspace ONE Intelligence, can be used to proactively identify and mitigate risks associated with unmanaged or non-compliant devices and applications. This approach aligns with best practices for modern endpoint security and data protection, ensuring that the organization maintains control over its digital assets while enabling a flexible work environment. It directly addresses the need for a holistic security posture that encompasses both corporate-issued and bring-your-own devices, BYOD. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely rely on traditional perimeter-based security measures and ignore the proliferation of mobile devices and applications. This fails to acknowledge the modern threat landscape where endpoints are the new perimeter, creates significant regulatory and ethical failures by neglecting the duty of care to protect sensitive data residing on unmanaged devices, potentially violating data privacy regulations and internal compliance mandates. Another incorrect approach is to implement a blanket ban on all unapproved devices and applications. While seemingly secure, this approach is often impractical and can lead to user frustration, reduced productivity, and the further entrenchment of shadow IT as users find workarounds. Ethically, it can be seen as overly restrictive and detrimental to employee autonomy. From a regulatory standpoint, it might not fully address the risks if critical business functions are forced onto insecure, unmanaged platforms outside of IT's purview. A third incorrect approach is to only focus on corporate-tissue devices and neglect the BYOD scenario entirely. This overlooks a significant portion of the modern workforce and the devices they use for business purposes. It creates a security gap, as sensitive data may still be accessed and processed on these unmanaged personal devices, leading to potential data breaches and compliance violations. It fails to meet the ethical obligation to secure data wherever it resides and is accessed. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a risk-based, adaptive security model. This involves understanding the organization's specific threat landscape, regulatory obligation, business requirements. The decision-making process should prioritize solutions that offer comprehensive visibility and control over endpoints and applications. This includes evaluating the capabilities of Workspace ONE to enforce granular policies, automate security tasks, and provide actionable intelligence. When faced with new technologies or user behaviors, professionals should conduct a thorough risk assessment, considering potential impacts on data security, compliance, and user experience. The goal is to implement solutions that are both effective in mitigating risks and practical for ongoing management, fostering a culture of security awareness and collaboration rather than solely relying on punitive measures. Question 2. Risk assessment procedures indicate a critical security vulnerability has been identified in a widely used enterprise application within the Workspace ONE managed environment. The vulnerability could allow for remote code execution if exploited. The IT security team has obtained a patch from the vendor. What is the most appropriate best practice approach for deploying this patch to mitigate the risk effectively while minimizing operational disruption? Option A. Isolate all endpoints running the affected application from the network until a patch can be deployed to prevent any potential exploitation. Option B. Deploy the security patch to all managed endpoints immediately to ensure maximum protection against the identified vulnerability. Option C. Defer the patch deployment until the next scheduled maintenance window to avoid interrupting user workflows and to allow for more thorough testing. Option D. Implement a phased rollout of the security patch, beginning with a pilot group of non-critical systems and users, followed by a gradual expansion to the entire user base after successful validation. The correct answer is D. Implement a phased rollout of the security patch, beginning with a pilot group of non-critical systems and users, followed by a gradual expansion to the entire user base after successful validation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT environments where a critical security vulnerability is discovered in a widely deployed application. The challenge lies in balancing the urgent need to mitigate the risk of exploitation with the operational impact of deploying a fix across a diverse and potentially sensitive user base. Rapid, uncoordinated patching can lead to application instability, user disruption, and potential data loss, while a delayed response increases the attack surface and the likelihood of a breach. Professional judgment is required to select the most effective and least disruptive remediation strategy. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout of the security patch, starting with a pilot group of non-critical systems and users. This aligns with best practices for change management and risk mitigation. By testing the patch in a controlled environment, IT administrators can identify and resolve any compatibility issues or unintended consequences before a wider deployment. This minimizes the risk of widespread operational disruption and ensures the integrity of the production environment. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes the security of the organization and its data while also respecting the operational needs of the business and its users. It also adheres to the principle of due diligence in IT security management. Incorrect approaches analysis. Deploying the patch immediately to all endpoints without prior testing is a regulatory and ethical failure. This approach disregards the potential for unforeseen operational impacts, which could lead to significant business disruption, data integrity issues, or even security vulnerabilities introduced by the patching process itself. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to implement a robust change management process, potentially violating internal IT governance policies and industry best practices for secure system administration. Isolating all affected endpoints from the network until a patch is available is also an incorrect approach in most scenarios. While it effectively stops the immediate threat, it can cripple business operations for users who rely on those endpoints for their work. This extreme measure can lead to significant productivity loss and may not be a sustainable or proportionate response, especially if the vulnerability has a low exploitability or if alternative, less disruptive mitigation strategies exist. It fails to balance security needs with business continuity requirements. Ignoring the vulnerability due to the potential for user disruption is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. This constitutes negligence and a direct violation of the organization's responsibility to protect its assets and data. It exposes the organization to significant legal, financial, and reputational damage in the event of a breach. This approach demonstrates a complete disregard for security best practices and a failure to uphold professional IT responsibilities. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the severity and exploitability of the vulnerability. This involves consulting threat intelligence and vendor advisories. Next, they should assess the potential impact of both the vulnerability and the proposed remediation on the business. A risk-based approach is paramount, prioritizing actions that offer the greatest security benefit with the least acceptable operational risk. This typically involves a structured change management process, including impact analysis, testing, phased deployment, and rollback plans. Communication with stakeholders, including end users and management, is also crucial throughout the process. Question 3. To address the challenge of maintaining a consistent and robust security posture across a diverse fleet of corporate and BYOD endpoints accessing sensitive corporate data, which approach best aligns with modern endpoint security best practices and regulatory compliance expectations for a VMware Workspace 121 X environment? Option A. Rely on endpoint antivirus software alone to detect and quarantine threats, assuming that user awareness training is sufficient to prevent most security incidents. Option B. Focus exclusively on securing corporate-owned laptops and ignore the security implications of BYOD smartphones and tablets accessing corporate resources. Option C. Conduct quarterly manual security audits of all corporate-owned devices and enforce a blanket policy restricting access to all cloud applications for any device not explicitly managed by IT. Option D. Implement a continuous monitoring framework using Workspace ONE intelligence to analyze device telemetry, identify compliance deviations, and trigger automated remediation workflows based on predefined security policies. The correct answer is D. Implement a continuous monitoring framework using Workspace ONE intelligence to analyze device telemetry, identify compliance deviations, and trigger automated remediation workflows based on predefined security policies. Explanation. Scenario analysis. The scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT, balancing the need for robust security and compliance with the operational efficiency and user experience of a modern digital workspace. Organizations are increasingly reliant on cloud-based services and mobile devices, which introduces new attack vectors and complicates traditional security models. Ensuring that all endpoints, regardless of their location or ownership, corporate vs. BYOD, adhere to established security policies and regulatory requirements is paramount. This requires a proactive and adaptive approach to device management and security posture assessment, especially when dealing with sensitive data. The challenge lies in implementing controls that are effective without being overly restrictive, thereby impacting productivity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach leverages Workspace ONE integrated capabilities to establish a comprehensive and dynamic security posture. By utilizing Intelligent Hub for agent-based telemetry, and integrating with Workspace ONE intelligence for advanced analytics and automation, administrators can gain real-time visibility into device compliance. This allows for the proactive identification of non-compliant devices and the automated enforcement of remediation actions, such as requiring updates, enforcing encryption, or restricting access to sensitive applications. This aligns with best practices for modern endpoint security and data protection, ensuring that the organization's security posture is continuously monitored and maintained in accordance with its risk appetite and any applicable regulatory frameworks. The ability to define granular compliance policies and trigger automated responses is crucial for maintaining a secure and productive environment. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves relying solely on manual audits and periodic security scans. This method is inherently reactive, meaning that security vulnerabilities or compliance gaps may exist for extended periods before being detected. This significantly increases the organization's exposure to threats and potential regulatory penalties. It fails to meet the dynamic security demands of a modern workspace and is not a scalable solution. Another incorrect approach is to implement overly broad security policies that restrict access to all cloud applications for all users, regardless of their device's security posture or the sensitivity of the data being accessed. While seemingly secure, this approach severely hinders user productivity and adoption of essential cloud services, leading to workarounds that can introduce further security risks. It also fails to demonstrate a nuanced understanding of risk-based security. A third incorrect approach is to ignore BYOD devices entirely and focus only on corporate-owned endpoints. This overlooks a significant portion of the modern workforce's device landscape. Sensitive corporate data can easily reside on or be accessed from unmanaged personal devices, creating a substantial security blind spot and a high risk of data leakage or noncompliance with data protection regulations. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a risk-based and data-driven approach to endpoint security and compliance. This involves understanding the organization's specific threat landscape, regulatory obligations, and business objectives. The decision-making process should prioritize solutions that offer real-time visibility, automated enforcement, and granular control. Continuous monitoring and adaptation are key. When evaluating solutions, consider their ability to integrate with existing security tools, provide actionable insights, and support a flexible management model that accommodates both corporate and BYOD scenarios. The goal is to achieve a balance between security, compliance, and user productivity, ensuring that the chosen strategy is both effective and sustainable. Question 4. Risk assessment procedures indicate that a critical business application containing sensitive customer data requires enhanced access controls beyond standard user permissions. The current implementation involves a broad departmental group assignment, leading to potential overaccess. The IT security team needs to implement a more granular and secure method for granting access to this application within the VMware Workspace 121X environment, ensuring that only authorized personnel can access it from compliant devices. What is the most effective and professionally recommended approach to implement these enhanced access controls for the sensitive application? Option A. Create a dedicated, role-based access group for the sensitive application and integrate it with Workspace 1 conditional access policies that evaluate device compliance and user context. Option B. Manually assign individual users to the application's access group on a case-by-case basis, as requests are received. Option C. Assign all users within the broader department that utilizes the application to the application's access group, assuming most will eventually need access. Option D. Create a unique, highly granular access group for every single user who requires access to the application. The correct answer is A. Create a dedicated, role-based access group for the sensitive application and integrate it with Workspace 1 conditional access policies that evaluate device compliance and user context. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in Workspace 1 environments, balancing the need for granular application access control with the operational overhead of managing numerous, potentially overlapping access groups. The challenge lies in identifying the most efficient and secure method to grant access to a sensitive application, ensuring that only authorized personnel can utilize it, while minimizing administrative burden and the risk of misconfiguration. The complexity arises from the potential for users to belong to multiple groups, leading to unintended access or access denial if not managed carefully. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach leverages Workspace 1 inherent capabilities for dynamic group membership and conditional access policies. By creating a dedicated, role-based access group for the sensitive application, and then assigning users to this group based on their specific job function or department, administrators ensure that access is directly tied to a defined requirement. This aligns with the principle of least privilege, fundamental security best practice. Furthermore, integrating this with conditional access policies that evaluate device compliance and user context before granting access adds another layer of security, ensuring that even authorized users can only access the application from a trusted and compliant endpoint. This approach is professionally sound because it is scalable, auditable, and reduces the likelihood of human error in manual assignment. It directly addresses the risk assessment findings by implementing a controlled and verifiable access mechanism. Incorrect approaches analysis. Assigning all users within a broad department to the application's access group, regardless of their specific need, violates the principle of least privilege. This creates an unnecessary security risk by granting access to individuals who do not require it, increasing the attack surface and the potential for data breaches or misuse. It is professionally unacceptable as it fails to implement adequate security controls and increases the administrative burden of managing access for users who may not even be aware they have it. Manually assigning individual users to the application's access group is highly inefficient and prone to errors. As the user base grows or roles change, this manual process becomes unsustainable and significantly increases the risk of misconfiguration, either by forgetting to grant access to new users or by failing to revoke access for departing employees. This approach is professionally deficient because it lacks scalability and auditability, directly contradicting best practices for secure and efficient IT administration. Creating a separate, highly specific access group for each individual user who requires access to the application is an extreme and impractical approach. While it adheres to the principle of least privilege at an individual level, it creates an unmanageable administrative overhead. The sheer volume of groups would overwhelm the system, making it difficult to track, manage, and audit access. This is professionally unsound due to its complete lack of scalability and its detrimental impact on operational efficiency. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach this challenge by first understanding the specific security requirements and the user base for the sensitive application. The decision-making process should prioritize security best practices, such as the principle of least privilege and defense in depth. This involves evaluating the available tools and features within Workspace to implement the most efficient, scalable, and auditable solution. A structured approach would involve 1. Defining the exact user roles and responsibilities that necessitate access. 2. Identifying or creating appropriate, well-defined user groups in Workspace that accurately reflect these roles. 3. Configuring conditional access policies to enforce device compliance and user context. 4. Regularly reviewing and auditing access assignments to ensure ongoing compliance and security. Question 5. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new multi-factor authentication (MFA) policy for all Workspace ONE managed devices will significantly reduce the risk of unauthorized access. However, initial feedback from a small user focus group indicates concerns about increased login complexity and potential disruptions to their daily workflows. The IT security team is eager to deploy this immediately to enhance the organization's security posture. What is the most professionally responsible approach to implementing this new MFA policy? Option A. Roll out the MFA policy to all users without any prior user training or communication, assuming users will adapt quickly to the new security requirements. Option B. Deploy the MFA policy to all users immediately, with a follow-up communication plan to address any issues that arise. Option C. Implement the MFA policy in phases, starting with a pilot group of users, and gather feedback to refine the rollout and support strategy before a broader deployment. Option D. Postpone the MFA policy implementation indefinitely until all user concerns about login complexity can be fully addressed and mitigated. Correct answer is B. Deploy the MFA policy to all users immediately, with a follow-up communication plan to address any issues that arise. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT, balancing the desire for cutting-edge security features with the practical realities of user experience and existing infrastructure. The core of the challenge lies in the potential for a new security feature to introduce friction for end users, impacting productivity and potentially leading to workarounds that undermine security. Professionals must navigate this by considering not just the technical benefits, but also the human element and the broader organizational impact. The correct approach prioritizes a phased, user-centric rollout, coupled with comprehensive communication and support. This aligns with best practices in change management and security adoption. By starting with a pilot group, IT can gather real-world feedback, identify unforeseen issues, and refine the deployment strategy before a full rollout. This minimizes disruption and allows for targeted training and support, ensuring users understand the value and proper use of the new feature. This approach is ethically sound as it respects user needs while fulfilling the organization's duty to protect sensitive data. It also adheres to principles of responsible technology deployment, ensuring that security measures are effective without being unduly burdensome. An incorrect approach would be to immediately enforce the new security feature across all users without prior testing or communication. This fails to acknowledge the potential for user resistance and technical glitches, leading to widespread disruption and potentially a decline in productivity. Ethically, this approach disregards the impact on users and could be seen as a failure to adequately prepare the workforce for new security protocols. Another incorrect approach would be to delay the implementation indefinitely due to minor user concerns raised during initial discussions. While user feedback is important, an over-reliance on addressing every minor concern can lead to stagnation and leave the organization vulnerable to evolving threats. This demonstrates a failure to balance security needs with operational realities and a lack of decisive leadership in implementing necessary security enhancements. Finally, implementing the feature without any user training or documentation is a clear ethical and professional failing. It places an undue burden on users to figure out a complex new system, increasing the likelihood of errors and security breaches, and demonstrating a lack of due diligence in protecting organizational assets and user data. Professionals should approach such decisions by first clearly defining the security problem the new feature aims to solve and its potential benefits. This should be followed by a thorough assessment of the impact on user workflows and existing infrastructure. Engaging key stakeholders, including end users and IT support teams, early in the process is crucial. A pilot program is an invaluable tool for validating assumptions and gathering practical feedback. Finally, a clear communication plan, comprehensive training materials, and readily available support are essential for a successful and ethically responsible deployment. Question 6. The control framework reveals that a new corporate policy mandates stricter access controls for all applications containing sensitive customer data. The IT team is tasked with implementing these controls within the existing VMware Workspace 1 environment, which currently has a broad set of access policies in place. The primary challenge is to enforce the new policy effectively without causing significant disruption to end-user productivity or introducing new security vulnerabilities through user workarounds. Option A. Update the existing access policies to be less restrictive, assuming that users will naturally adapt to the new security requirements without explicit enforcement. Option B. Deploy the new access control policy to a small, representative pilot group of users first. Collect feedback, monitor for issues, and refine the policy before a full rollout. Option C. Postpone the implementation of the new access control policy indefinitely until a perfect, zero-impact solution can be identified. Option D. Implement the new access control policy immediately across all user groups and devices managed by Workspace 1, with a plan to address any reported issues reactively. The correct answer is D. Implement the new access control policy immediately across all user groups and devices managed by Workspace 1, with a plan to address any reported issues reactively. Explanation. The control framework reveals a common implementation challenge when integrating new security policies within a mature Workspace 1 environment. Specifically, the scenario presents a conflict between the need for granular access control to sensitive applications and the potential for user friction caused by overly restrictive policies. The professional challenge lies in balancing robust security posture with end-user productivity and adoption, ensuring compliance without hindering legitimate business operations. This requires a deep understanding of Workspace 1 capabilities and a strategic approach to policy deployment. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a phased, risk-based rollout. By initially targeting a pilot group, administrators can validate the effectiveness of the new policy, gather user feedback, and identify any unintended consequences before a full deployment. This iterative process allows for adjustments and refinements, minimizing disruption and ensuring the policy aligns with both security requirements and user workflows. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and the need for demonstrable due diligence in security implementations, which are implicitly expected in professional IT environments. An incorrect approach that involves immediate, broad deployment without pilot testing poses significant regulatory and ethical risks. Such an action could lead to widespread user lockout from critical applications, impacting business continuity and potentially violating service-level agreements or even data access regulations if users are unable to perform their duties. This demonstrates a failure in risk assessment and change management, which are fundamental ethical responsibilities for IT professionals. Another incorrect approach focusing solely on technical enforcement without considering user impact or communication, is also professionally unacceptable. This can lead to user frustration, workarounds that bypass security controls, and a general erosion of trust in the IT department. Ethically, IT professionals have a responsibility to facilitate user access to necessary tools while maintaining security. Ignoring the human element in security policy implementation is a critical oversight. Finally, an approach that delays the implementation indefinitely due to fear of user impact, without any plan for mitigation or phased rollout, represents a failure to uphold security responsibilities. This inaction can leave the organization vulnerable to threats, which is a direct contravention of the duty to protect organizational assets and data. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, a clear understanding of business requirements, and a phased implementation strategy. This includes defining success criteria, establishing feedback mechanisms, and having a rollback plan. Prioritizing user experience alongside security is crucial for successful technology adoption and compliance. Question 7. Consider a scenario where an IT administrator, tasked with enhancing endpoint security using VMware Workspace 1, discovers that the platform can provide detailed logs of user activity, including application usage, website visits, and even keystroke logging capabilities. The organization has experienced a recent increase in minor security incidents, but no major breaches. The administrator believes that comprehensive, continuous monitoring of all user activity would proactively identify and prevent future incidents. What is the most ethically and professionally sound approach to implementing enhanced monitoring? Option A. Focus monitoring efforts solely on a select group of employees who have been involved in previous minor security incidents, without broad notification to the rest of the workforce, to investigate potential patterns of behavior. Option B. Review and update the organization's acceptable use policy (OP) and privacy guidelines to clearly define the scope, purpose, and limitations of user activity monitoring for security purposes, and communicate these updated policies transparently to all employees before implementing any enhanced monitoring. Option C. Implement comprehensive, continuous monitoring of all user activity, including detailed application usage and website visits, to proactively identify potential security risks, without explicitly informing end users of the extent of this monitoring beyond general security awareness. Option D. Immediately enable all available logging features within Workspace 1, including keystroke logging, for all users, citing the recent increase in minor security incidents as justification for an aggressive security posture. Correct answer is C. Implement comprehensive, continuous monitoring of all user activity, including detailed application usage and website visits, to proactively identify potential security risks, without explicitly informing end users of the extent of this monitoring beyond general security awareness. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in balancing organizational security imperatives with individual user privacy rights. The core conflict lies in the potential for overreach in monitoring user activity, even when ostensibly for security purposes. The ethical dilemma is amplified by the fact that Workspace 1, while a powerful management tool, can also be perceived as intrusive if not implemented and managed with strict adherence to privacy principles and established organizational policies. The professional challenge is to ensure that security measures are proportionate to the identified risks and do not unnecessarily infringe upon employee privacy, which can erode trust and lead to resistance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach emphasizes transparency and adherence to established policies, by informing users about the scope and purpose of monitoring and ensuring that such monitoring aligns with the organization's acceptable use policy, OP, and privacy guidelines. The IT administrator upholds ethical standards and regulatory compliance. This approach respects user privacy by limiting data collection to what is strictly necessary for security incident investigation, and by ensuring that the collected data is handled with appropriate confidentiality and access controls. This aligns with general principles of data protection and privacy, which are increasingly codified in regulations globally, requiring organizations to be transparent about data collection and processing activities. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves conducting extensive, unannounced monitoring of user activity, including personal communications or non-work-related activities, under the guise of general security. This constitutes a significant ethical and potential regulatory failure. It violates the principle of proportionality, collecting more data than is necessary to address a specific security threat. Such actions can breach implied or explicit privacy expectations and may contravene data protection laws that require consent or a legitimate basis for data processing, and mandate data minimization. Another incorrect approach is to selectively monitor only specific employees without a clear, documented, and justifiable reason, such as a credible suspicion of policy violation or security breach. This can lead to accusations of unfair targeting, discrimination, and a breakdown of trust within the organization. It fails to apply security measures consistently and equitably, creating an environment of suspicion and potentially violating principles of fairness and due process. A third incorrect approach is to use the collected security data for purposes beyond incident response, such as performance evaluation or disciplinary actions unrelated to security, without explicit prior notification and consent. This represents a misuse of data and a breach of trust, violates the principle of purpose limitation, where data collected for one specific, legitimate purpose should not be repurposed for another without proper authorization and transparency. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this field must adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes transparency, proportionality, and adherence to policy. This involves 1. Understanding and clearly defining the organization's security policies and privacy guidelines. 2. Ensuring that any monitoring activities are explicitly covered by these policies and are communicated to users. 3. Limiting data collection to the minimum necessary for the stated security purpose. 4. Establishing clear protocols for data access, retention, and deletion. 5. Regularly reviewing and auditing monitoring practices to ensure ongoing compliance and ethical conduct. 6. Seeking legal and HR counsel when developing or implementing monitoring strategies to ensure alignment with all applicable laws and ethical standards. Question 8. The investigation demonstrates that a system administrator managing a VMware Workspace 1 environment has identified a potential security vulnerability that could expose sensitive corporate data. The administrator has a personal acquaintance who is a cybersecurity researcher with expertise in this area. The administrator is considering whether to discreetly inform the acquaintance about the vulnerability to expedite its understanding and potential remediation, or to follow the organization's formal incident reporting procedures. Option A. Share the technical details of the vulnerability with the cybersecurity researcher acquaintance, requesting their assistance in understanding its scope and potential impact. Option B. Advise the cybersecurity researcher acquaintance to independently search for and discover the vulnerability, hoping they will report it responsibly to the organization. Option C. Document the vulnerability internally but delay reporting it until the administrator has personally verified its exploitability through further independent research. Option D. Report the vulnerability immediately through the organization's designated incident response channels, without disclosing it to any external parties until authorized by the organization. The correct answer is D. Report the vulnerability immediately through the organization's designated incident response channels, without disclosing it to any external parties until authorized by the organization. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a scenario where a system administrator, responsible for managing a VMware Workspace 1 environment, discovers a potential security vulnerability. This vulnerability, if exploited, could lead to unauthorized access to sensitive corporate data. The administrator has a personal relationship with an individual outside the organization who is a cybersecurity researcher. This researcher has expressed interest in the specific type of vulnerability the administrator has identified. The challenge lies in balancing the ethical obligation to protect the organization's data and systems with the potential benefit of collaborating with an external expert to address the vulnerability responsibly. The correct approach involves adhering strictly to the organization's established incident response and disclosure policies. This means reporting the vulnerability internally through the designated channels, allowing the organization to assess and remediate the issue according to its security protocols. This aligns with professional best practices by prioritizing the organization's security and data integrity, fulfilling the administrator's duty of care, and adhering to any relevant data protection regulations that mandate timely breach notification and mitigation. An incorrect approach would be to directly share the details of the vulnerability with the external cybersecurity researcher without proper authorization or following internal procedures. This action would violate the administrator's confidentiality obligations to the employer and could expose the organization to significant risk if the researcher does not handle the information ethically, or if the disclosure process is not managed securely. Such an action could also contravene data protection laws that require organizations to implement appropriate technical and organizational measures to protect personal data, including preventing unauthorized disclosure. Another incorrect approach would be to ignore the vulnerability, hoping it goes unnoticed. This demonstrates a failure in professional responsibility and a disregard for the organization's security posture, potentially leading to a breach and significant legal and financial repercussions for the organization. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes organizational policy, legal compliance, and ethical conduct. This involves understanding the organization's incident response plan, data protection policies, and any applicable regulatory requirements. When faced with a potential vulnerability, the immediate step should always be to report it through the established internal channels. If external collaboration is deemed necessary, it must be initiated and managed by the appropriate internal stakeholders, such as the security team or legal department, ensuring that any disclosures are controlled and authorized. Question 9. Upon reviewing the capabilities of VMware Workspace ONE to monitor device usage and application data for security and compliance purposes, a decision needs to be made regarding the extent of data collection from employee-owned devices enrolled in the BYOD program. The IT department has the technical ability to collect detailed application usage logs, browsing history, and location data. However, employees have expressed concerns about privacy. What is the most ethically sound and professionally responsible approach to implementing enhanced monitoring? Option A. Enable extensive data collection of application usage, browsing history, and location data by default for all BYOD devices, assuming that enrollment in the BYOD program implies consent to all monitoring activities. Option B. Implement comprehensive data collection, including application usage, browsing history, and location data, after clearly communicating the policy to employees and obtaining their explicit opt-in consent through a dedicated Workspace ONE enrollment process. Option C. Collect only essential device health and security status data, without informing employees about the potential for more extensive data collection to avoid unnecessary privacy concerns. Option D. Implement detailed application usage and browsing history collection for all BYOD devices, but exclude location data collection to mitigate some privacy concerns, without explicitly seeking consent for the collected data types. The correct answer is B. Implement comprehensive data collection, including application usage, browsing history, and location data, after clearly communicating the policy to employees and obtaining their explicit opt-in consent through a dedicated Workspace ONE enrollment process. Explanation. This scenario presents an ethical dilemma concerning data privacy and user consent within the context of VMware Workspace ONE management. The professional challenge lies in balancing the organization's need for comprehensive device visibility and security with the individual user's right to privacy and control over their personal data. The specific jurisdiction for this exam is not explicitly stated, therefore, general ethical principles and best practices in IT management, aligned with common data protection frameworks like GDPR or similar principles, will be applied. The correct approach prioritizes transparency and explicit user consent before enabling extensive data collection. This aligns with the ethical principle of respecting user autonomy and the regulatory expectation of informed consent for data processing. By clearly communicating the purpose of data collection, the types of data being collected, and providing users with a clear opt-in mechanism, the organization upholds user trust and adheres to data protection best practices. This proactive approach minimizes the risk of privacy violations and potential legal repercussions. An incorrect approach that proceeds with enabling extensive data collection without explicit user consent or clear communication violates fundamental privacy principles. This could be considered a breach of trust and potentially contravenes data protection regulations that mandate transparency and consent for processing personal data. Such an action could lead to user dissatisfaction, reputational damage, and legal penalties. Another incorrect approach, which involves collecting data without informing users about its scope or purpose, is ethically unsound and legally risky. Users are not given the opportunity to make an informed decision about their data, undermining their control and privacy. This lack of transparency is a common failing in data handling practices and can lead to significant compliance issues. A further incorrect approach, which might involve collecting only minimal data, but still without clear consent or communication, is also problematic. While the data collected might be less sensitive, the absence of transparency and consent still erodes user trust and can still fall short of regulatory requirements for informed consent, especially if the data, when aggregated, could reveal sensitive information. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, considering both the technical capabilities of Workspace ONE and the ethical and legal implications of data collection. It requires consulting with legal and compliance teams, clearly defining the business need for data collection, and designing a user-centric approach that prioritizes transparency, consent, and data minimization where possible. The goal is to achieve organizational objectives without compromising user privacy or violating regulatory mandates. Question 10. The efficiency study reveals that the current Workspace ONE device onboarding process collects a comprehensive set of user profile data, including optional demographic information and device usage patterns, by default during initial enrollment to pre-populate future user experience enhancements. This automated collection occurs without explicit user consent for each data point beyond basic account verification. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure compliance with data privacy principles and maintain user trust? Option A. Implement a data anonymization process for all collected user data after onboarding so that the data is no longer personally identifiable and proceed with the current collection methods. Option B. Develop a separate, mandatory user training module that explains the benefits of comprehensive data collection for personalized experiences, requiring users to acknowledge and agree to it before proceeding with onboarding. Option C. Continue the current onboarding process, but update the privacy policy to more explicitly state that all collected data will be used for future enhancements, assuming users will review and accept it. Option D. Modify the onboarding workflow to collect only essential user data required for device provisioning and security. Implement a clear, opt-in mechanism for users to consent to the collection of additional data for specific features, with transparent explanations of its purpose. The correct answer is D. Modify the onboarding workflow to collect only essential user data required for device provisioning and security. Implement a clear, opt-in mechanism for users to consent to the collection of additional data for specific features, with transparent explanations of its purpose. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a potential conflict between the desire to streamline device onboarding and the imperative to maintain data privacy and security, particularly concerning the handling of sensitive user information collected during the enrollment process. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing operational efficiency with strict adherence to data protection principles. The core of the challenge lies in determining how to leverage Workspace ONE capabilities for rapid deployment, without compromising user trust or violating regulatory requirements related to data minimization and consent. The correct approach involves implementing a phased data collection strategy during device onboarding. This means collecting only the absolute minimum data necessary for initial device provisioning and security configuration. Subsequent data collection for enhanced features or analytics should be explicitly requested from the user with clear explanations of what data is being collected and why, and should be opt-in. This approach aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, which are fundamental to data privacy regulations. By obtaining explicit consent for any data collection beyond essential provisioning, the organization upholds user autonomy and demonstrates a commitment to responsible data handling, thereby fostering trust and mitigating legal and reputational risks. This aligns with the ethical obligation to protect user privacy and the regulatory requirement to process personal data lawfully and fairly. An incorrect approach would be to automatically collect all available user data during the initial onboarding process, assuming it might be useful later. This violates the principle of data minimization, as it gathers more data than is immediately necessary for the stated purpose of device provisioning. This could lead to regulatory noncompliance if the collected data is not adequately protected or if it is processed without a clear legal basis or user consent. Another incorrect approach would be to obscure the data collection practices within lengthy and complex privacy policies that users are unlikely to read. This undermines transparency and informed consent, creating an ethical failure and potentially violating regulations that mandate clear and accessible information about data processing. Such practices erode user trust and expose the organization to significant legal penalties and reputational damage. Professionals should approach such situations by first identifying the core business objective, efficient onboarding, and then mapping it against relevant data privacy principles and regulations. A risk-based approach is crucial, where potential privacy implications of each step in the onboarding process are assessed. Prioritizing user consent and transparency, even if it slightly impacts immediate efficiency, is a hallmark of best professional practice. Decision-making should be guided by a framework that emphasizes data minimization, purpose limitation, transparency, and user control, ensuring that technological solutions serve business needs without compromising fundamental privacy rights. Question 11. Examination of the data shows that the current process for onboarding new mobile devices to Workspace ONE is experiencing significant delays, leading to user frustration and increased support ticket volume. The IT team is eager to implement a new automated enrollment workflow that they believe will drastically reduce onboarding time. However, they have not yet established current performance metrics for the existing process, nor have they conducted a thorough security risk assessment of the proposed automated workflow. What is the most professionally responsible approach to address this process optimization challenge? Option A. Focus solely on improving the existing manual onboarding steps to eliminate immediate bottlenecks, deferring any consideration of automated workflows until the current process is fully optimized. Option B. Prioritize the implementation of the automated workflow based on the team's perceived efficiency gains, and address any security or compliance concerns reactively as they arise. Option C. Conduct a comprehensive analysis of the current onboarding process to establish baseline metrics, identify specific bottlenecks, and then design and test the proposed automated workflow with a focus on security and compliance before full implementation. Option D. Immediately implement the proposed automated enrollment workflow to address user frustration and reduce support load, assuming the benefits of automation outweigh potential risks. The correct answer is D. Immediately implement the proposed automated enrollment workflow to address user frustration and reduce support load, assuming the benefits of automation outweigh potential risks. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT process optimization, balancing the immediate need for operational efficiency with the long-term implications of security and compliance. The professional challenge lies in identifying and implementing changes that streamline workflows without introducing vulnerabilities or violating established regulatory frameworks. In this context, adhering to the principles of the 2V0-62-21 exam syllabus, particularly regarding process optimization within a Workspace ONE environment, requires a deep understanding of how changes impact the entire ecosystem. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, data-driven, and compliant method for process improvement. By first establishing baseline metrics, then identifying bottlenecks through analysis, and finally proposing solutions that are validated against security and compliance requirements, the process ensures that optimizations are effective, sustainable, and risk-mitigated. This aligns with the professional responsibility to maintain a secure and compliant IT infrastructure, as mandated by general IT governance principles and implicitly by the need to manage enterprise endpoints effectively. Incorrect approaches fail to meet professional standards due to several regulatory and ethical shortcomings. Implementing changes without understanding the current state, baseline metrics, leads to uninformed decisions, potentially causing more harm than good and violating the principle of due diligence. Introducing new configurations without assessing their security implications directly contravenes the ethical obligation to protect organizational data and systems. Furthermore, bypassing established change management and approval processes, even for seemingly minor optimizations, undermines the integrity of the IT environment and can lead to unforeseen conflicts or security breaches, which are unacceptable from a compliance and risk management perspective. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Understand the current state, gather data and establish baseline metrics for the process in question. 2. Identify pain points, analyze the data to pinpoint inefficiencies, bottlenecks, or areas of user dissatisfaction. 3. Propose solutions. Brainstorm potential optimization, considering technical feasibility and impact on user experience. 4. Assess risks and compliance. Critically evaluate each proposed solution for security vulnerabilities and adherence to all relevant regulatory frameworks and organizational policies. 5. Pilot and validate. Test the chosen solution in a controlled environment to confirm its effectiveness and identify any unintended consequences. 6. Implement and monitor. Deploy the optimized process and continuously monitor its performance and security posture. 7. Document and communicate. Maintain thorough documentation of the changes and communicate them to relevant stakeholders. Question 12. To address the challenge of providing seamless access to sensitive corporate resources for remote employees while ensuring compliance with data privacy regulations, which strategy best balances user experience with robust security and privacy controls within the VMware Workspace 121 X framework? Option A. Grant broad access to all corporate resources for all remote employees to maximize productivity and minimize user friction, relying solely on endpoint security software for protection. Option B. Implement granular access policies based on user roles, device compliance status, and the sensitivity of the resource being accessed, coupled with data loss prevention, DLP, measures to monitor and control data exfiltration. Option C. Deploy a VPN solution that requires all remote employees to connect through a central gateway before accessing any corporate resource, regardless of data sensitivity. Option D. Enable single sign-on (SSO) for all applications and resources without implementing any specific data access controls or compliance checks, assuming user trust. The correct answer is B. Implement granular access policies based on user roles, device compliance status, and the sensitivity of the resource being accessed, coupled with data loss prevention, DLP, measures to monitor and control data exfiltration. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between an organization's desire for streamlined user experience and the stringent requirements for data privacy and security mandated by regulatory frameworks. The need to balance these competing interests requires careful judgment and a thorough understanding of the workspace, one platform's capabilities and limitations, as well as the applicable regulatory landscape. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes user privacy and data security by implementing granular access controls and data loss prevention policies. This aligns with the principles of data minimization and purpose limitation, which are fundamental to many data protection regulations. By ensuring that sensitive data is only accessible to authorized personnel and that its transmission is secured, this approach mitigates the risk of data breaches and unauthorized disclosure, thereby upholding ethical obligations and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that involves broadly granting access to all users without proper segmentation or justification would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This would violate principles of least privilege and data minimization, increasing the attack surface and the likelihood of unauthorized access or misuse of sensitive information. Such an approach could lead to noncompliance with data protection laws, resulting in substantial fines and reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that focuses solely on technical implementation without considering the user's role or the sensitivity of the data would also be professionally unacceptable. This overlooks the importance of context in data security and privacy. Without understanding the why behind data access, security measures can be either overly restrictive, hindering productivity, or insufficiently protective, creating vulnerabilities. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a risk-based assessment. This begins with identifying the sensitive data and understanding its classification. Next, it requires mapping user roles and their legitimate business needs for accessing this data. Subsequently, the organization must evaluate the technical controls available within Workspace ONE to enforce these access requirements, including conditional access policies, data loss prevention rules, and application access controls. Finally, a continuous monitoring and auditing process should be established to ensure ongoing compliance and to adapt to evolving threats and regulatory requirements. Question 13. Market research demonstrates a growing demand for faster application deployment cycles within organizations utilizing VMware Workspace ONE. A project is initiated to optimize the process of assigning and updating applications for end users. The IT team is considering several approaches to achieve this optimization. Which approach best aligns with maintaining a secure and compliant Workspace ONE environment? Option A. Conduct a thorough review of existing application assignment policies. Leverage Workspace ONE built-in smart group and compliance policy features to dynamically assign applications based on user roles and device compliance, and implement a phased rollout of any process changes with proper change control and auditing. Option B. Develop a custom automation solution that directly modifies the Workspace ONE backend database to expedite application assignments and updates, bypassing standard API integrations. Option C. Temporarily disable certain security compliance checks within Workspace ONE for a limited time to accelerate the application deployment process, with the intention of re-enabling them once the backlog is cleared. Option D. Implement a script that automatically assigns all available applications to every user upon their initial login, with a subsequent script to remove unused applications after a defined period. The correct answer is D. Implement a script that automatically assigns all available applications to every user upon their initial login, with a subsequent script to remove unused applications after a defined period. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT process optimization, balancing the immediate need for efficiency gains with the long-term implications of security and compliance. The professional is tasked with streamlining a critical workflow within Workspace ONE, but must do so without compromising the established security posture or violating any applicable regulations. The challenge lies in identifying solutions that are not only technically sound, but also ethically and legally defensible within the specified regulatory framework. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the existing regulatory landscape and the specific requirements of the Workspace ONE environment before implementing any changes. This proactive stance ensures that optimization efforts are aligned with compliance mandates, thereby mitigating risks of data breaches, unauthorized access, or non-compliance penalties. Adhering to documented change management processes and seeking appropriate approvals demonstrates accountability and a commitment to maintaining a secure and compliant system. An incorrect approach that bypasses established security protocols, even for perceived efficiency, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Such actions can lead to vulnerabilities that expose sensitive data, violating data protection regulations. Similarly, implementing changes without proper authorization or documentation undermines audit trails and accountability, which are critical for regulatory compliance and incident response. Ignoring the potential impact on user privacy or data integrity is a direct contravention of ethical IT practices and often explicit legal requirements. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive assessment of the current state, including existing processes, security controls, and regulatory obligations. This is followed by identifying potential optimization opportunities and evaluating them against these requirements. Any proposed changes must undergo a risk assessment and a formal change management process, including impact analysis and stakeholder approval. The decision should always favor solutions that enhance efficiency, while demonstrably maintaining or improving security and compliance. Question 14. Analysis of the introduction of VMware Workspace 121 X within a multinational corporation, considering the diverse priorities of its finance, legal, and IT operations departments. What is the most prudent and professionally responsible approach to ensure successful deployment while adhering to regulatory frameworks and maximizing business value? Option A. Initiate a Big Bang deployment across all departments simultaneously to achieve immediate widespread adoption and realize the full benefits of Workspace ONE as quickly as possible. Option B. Prioritize the implementation based solely on the technical capabilities and preferences of the IT operations team, ensuring seamless integration with existing infrastructure. Option C. Focus exclusively on enhancing end-user experience and productivity features during the initial deployment, deferring comprehensive security and compliance reviews to a later stage. Option D. Implement a phased rollout strategy, beginning with a pilot program for a select group of users and critical business functions, to gather feedback, refine configurations, and validate security and compliance measures before a broader deployment. The correct answer is D. Implement a phased rollout strategy, beginning with a pilot program for a select group of users and critical business functions, to gather feedback, refine configurations, and validate security and compliance measures before a broader deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT environments where a new technology, Workspace ONE, is being introduced. The primary challenge lies in balancing the immediate need for enhanced security and user experience with the existing operational constraints and the diverse needs of different business units. Stakeholders, particularly those in finance and legal, will have distinct priorities. Finance will focus on cost-effectiveness and return on investment, while legal will be concerned with compliance and data privacy regulations. The IT operations team will be focused on stability, manageability, and integration with existing infrastructure. Navigating these competing interests requires a strategic approach that demonstrates clear value and addresses potential risks. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout strategy that prioritizes critical business functions and high-risk user groups first. This allows for early identification and mitigation of potential issues in a controlled environment. By starting with a pilot group, the IT team can gather real-world feedback, refine configurations, and validate security policies against actual usage patterns. This iterative process ensures that the solution is robust and meets the defined security and compliance requirements before a broader deployment, demonstrating tangible benefits such as improved security posture and user productivity to stakeholders like finance and legal through pilot results, builds confidence, and facilitates future budget approvals and compliance sign-offs. This aligns with best practices for change management and risk mitigation in IT deployments, ensuring that the introduction of Workspace ONE enhances, rather than hinders, business operations and regulatory adherence. Incorrect approaches analysis. A big bang rollout without a pilot phase is professionally unacceptable because it introduces significant risk. It bypasses the opportunity to identify and resolve unforeseen technical issues or user adoption challenges in a controlled manner. This can lead to widespread disruption, increased support costs, and potential security vulnerabilities if misconfigurations are not caught early. From a regulatory perspective, a poorly implemented security solution could inadvertently lead to data breaches or non-compliance with data protection laws, incurring fines and reputational damage. Implementing Workspace ONE solely based on the IT operations team's technical preferences, without adequate input from finance and legal, is also professionally unsound. This approach neglects the crucial business and compliance aspects. Finance may question the return on investment if the solution doesn't align with business objectives, or if costs are not managed effectively. Legal may raise concerns about data privacy and security controls if they are not thoroughly vetted against relevant regulations, potentially leading to non-compliance and legal repercussions. Focusing exclusively on user experience improvements without a strong emphasis on security and compliance is a critical failure. While user adoption is important, it cannot come at the expense of protecting sensitive data or meeting regulatory obligations. This approach risks creating a system that is easy to use but insecure, exposing the organization to data breaches and regulatory penalties. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured, risk-based approach to technology deployments. This involves 1. Understanding stakeholder needs. Actively engage with all relevant stakeholders, IT operations, security, legal, finance, business units, to identify their requirements, concerns, and priorities. 2. Risk assessment and mitigation. Conduct a thorough risk assessment for the proposed solution, identifying potential technical, security, compliance, and operational risks. Develop mitigation strategies for each identified risk. 3. Phased implementation and pilot programs. Whenever possible, implement new technologies in phases, starting with pilot programs to test and refine the solution in a controlled environment. This allows for early detection and correction of issues. 4. Demonstrate value and ROI. Clearly articulate the business value and return on investment of the proposed solution, supported by data and pilot results, to gain stakeholder buy-in, especially from finance. 5. Compliance and security by design. Ensure that security and compliance requirements are integrated into the design and implementation process from the outset, rather than being an afterthought. 6. Continuous monitoring and improvement. Establish processes for ongoing monitoring of the deployed solution to ensure it continues to meet security, compliance, and performance objectives, and to identify areas for improvement. Question 15. Market research demonstrates that organizations are increasingly adopting unified endpoint management solutions to enhance security and streamline IT operations. When implementing VMware Workspace 121, what is the most critical initial step from a stakeholder perspective to ensure a secure and compliant deployment that balances organizational needs with user experience? Option A. Immediately deploy Workspace ONE across all organizational devices to leverage its full capabilities and achieve rapid operational efficiencies. Option B. Implement the most restrictive security settings available within Workspace ONE to ensure maximum protection against all potential threats, regardless of user impact. Option C. Establish a comprehensive security and compliance policy framework for device enrollment, data access, and application management, followed by a pilot program to validate these policies and the deployment. Option D. Begin the Workspace ONE deployment without defining specific policies, assuming users will adapt to the new system and security will be addressed later. The correct answer is C. Establish a comprehensive security and compliance policy framework for device enrollment, data access, and application management, followed by a pilot program to validate these policies and the deployment. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT where a new technology, Workspace ONE, is being introduced to manage a diverse range of devices. The challenge lies in balancing the organization's need for robust security and compliance with the user's expectation of flexibility and ease of use. The introduction of a new management platform requires careful consideration of existing policies, potential impact on user workflows, and the need to adhere to any relevant data privacy regulations. The stakeholder perspective is critical here, as different groups, IT security, end user, management, will have varying priorities and concerns. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout strategy that prioritizes security and compliance from the outset. This means establishing clear policies for device enrollment, data access, and application management that align with the organization's security posture and any applicable regulatory requirements. A pilot program with a representative group of users allows for testing and refinement of these policies and the overall Workspace ONE deployment before a full-scale launch. This iterative process ensures that security controls are effective, user experience is acceptable, and compliance is maintained throughout the deployment lifecycle. This aligns with best practices for IT project management and security governance, ensuring that the technology serves the business objectives without introducing undue risk. Incorrect approaches analysis. Deploying Workspace ONE without a clear security and compliance policy framework is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach risks unauthorized access to sensitive data, noncompliance with data privacy laws, e.g., GDPR if applicable to the jurisdiction, though for this exam we focus on the exam's implied jurisdiction, which is generally US-centric for VMware unless otherwise specified, and potential data breaches. It prioritizes speed over security, which is professionally unacceptable. Implementing Workspace ONE with overly restrictive policies that hinder user productivity without a clear business justification is also professionally problematic. While security is paramount, excessively burdensome controls can lead to user workarounds, shadow IT, and decreased morale, ultimately undermining the intended benefits of the platform. This approach fails to consider the stakeholder perspective of the end user and can lead to a suboptimal implementation. Rolling out Workspace ONE without any form of user training or communication about the new policies and procedures creates confusion and potential noncompliance. Users may not understand how to use the platform correctly or why certain restrictions are in place, leading to accidental policy violations and security vulnerabilities. This lack of communication is a failure in stakeholder management and can lead to operational inefficiencies. Professional reasoning. professionals should approach the deployment of new management platforms like Workspace ONE by first understanding the organization's security and compliance requirements. This involves consulting with relevant stakeholders, including IT security, legal, and business unit representatives. A risk assessment should be conducted to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities. Based on this assessment, a comprehensive policy framework should be developed. A phased rollout, starting with a pilot program, allows for testing and validation of the policies and technical implementation. Continuous monitoring and feedback mechanisms are essential to adapt to evolving threats and user needs. The decision-making process should always prioritize security, compliance, and user experience in a balanced and justifiable manner. Question 16. System analysis indicates that a new organizational security policy requires all managed endpoints to enforce a specific password complexity and rotation schedule. The current Workspace ONE environment manages a diverse fleet of Windows, Mac OS, and Android devices, some of which are older models with varying operating system versions. The IT security team is concerned about the potential for widespread disruption if the policy is applied universally without adequate preparation. What is the most professional and effective approach to implement this new security policy across the managed endpoint fleet? Option A. Conduct a phased rollout of the new password policy, starting with a pilot group of representative devices and user roles, to identify and resolve any compatibility or user experience issues before a full deployment. Option B. Deploy the new password policy only to newly provisioned devices and exclude existing devices to avoid impacting current operations. Option C. Focus on educating users about the new password requirements and rely on their voluntary compliance, without enforcing the policy technically through Workspace ONE. Option D. Implement the new password policy immediately across all managed devices to ensure uniform compliance and minimize the window of vulnerability. The correct answer is D. Implement the new password policy immediately across all managed devices to ensure uniform compliance and minimize the window of vulnerability. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in enterprise IT environments where a new security policy needs to be implemented across a diverse range of managed devices. The professional challenge lies in balancing the strict security requirements mandated by the organization's compliance framework with the operational realities of end-user productivity and device compatibility. The need to ensure all devices, regardless of their operating system or age, adhere to the new policy without causing significant disruption requires careful planning, phased rollout, and robust communication. The inherent diversity of endpoints, including potentially older or less frequently updated devices, introduces complexity in achieving uniform compliance. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased and risk-based deployment strategy. This aligns with best practices for change management and security policy implementation. By first targeting a pilot group of representative devices and user roles, the IT team can identify and address potential compatibility issues, user experience impacts, and technical challenges before a full-scale rollout. This iterative testing and refinement process minimizes the risk of widespread service disruption and ensures that the policy is effective and practical. Furthermore, this approach allows for the collection of feedback from pilot users, enabling adjustments to the policy or its deployment method. This aligns with the principle of least privilege and proportionate security controls, ensuring that security measures are effective without being overly burdensome. The regulatory framework for 2V0-6221, while not explicitly detailing specific country laws, emphasizes secure and efficient endpoint management, which this phased approach directly supports by mitigating risks associated with rapid, untested changes. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the policy immediately across all devices without prior testing is a high-risk strategy. This approach fails to account for potential unforeseen technical conflicts or user impact, which could lead to widespread operational failures and a significant reduction in user productivity. Ethically, it disregards the impact on end users and could be seen as a failure to adequately plan and manage change. Deploying the policy only to new devices and excluding existing ones creates a security gap. This selective application leaves older or unmanaged devices vulnerable to threats that the new policy is designed to mitigate. This directly contravenes the principle of comprehensive security coverage and could lead to compliance violations if the regulatory framework mandates uniform security standards across all managed endpoints. Focusing solely on user training without technical enforcement of the policy is insufficient. While user education is important, it relies on user adherence, which can be inconsistent. Absence of technical controls means that the policy's effectiveness is not guaranteed, leaving the organization exposed to risks that the policy aims to address. This approach fails to provide the necessary assurance of compliance and security. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a structured and iterative approach to policy deployment. This involves understanding the existing environment, assessing potential risks and impacts, planning a phased rollout with pilot testing, and establishing clear communication channels with stakeholders. The decision-making process should prioritize minimizing disruption while maximizing security and compliance. This involves continuous monitoring and evaluation of the deployed policy and making necessary adjustments based on real-world performance and feedback. Question 17. Research into a recent surge in phishing attempts targeting mobile devices within the organization. A security administrator is tasked with recommending a Workspace ONE feature to enhance mobile endpoint security. The administrator needs to present a proposal to senior management that balances robust protection with minimal disruption to end-user productivity and compliance with existing data handling policies. Option A. Recommend the immediate deployment of a mandatory, full-disk encryption policy across all managed mobile devices without prior user notification or assessment of device compatibility, citing the general benefit of encryption. Option B. Propose the implementation of Workspace ONE Intelligent Hub's adaptive management policies, leveraging device posture checks and risk scoring to dynamically adjust security controls based on real-time threat indicators and device compliance status, ensuring that only compliant and secure devices can access corporate resources. Option C. Suggest enabling a broad, unrestricted VPN connection for all mobile devices to bypass potential network-based threats, without considering the implications for data exfiltration or the performance impact on mobile users. Option D. Advocate for the removal of all application-level security controls on mobile devices to simplify the user experience, arguing that endpoint security is solely the responsibility of the end user. The correct answer is B. Propose the implementation of Workspace ONE Intelligent Hub's adaptive management policies, leveraging device posture checks and risk scoring to dynamically adjust security controls based on real-time threat indicators and device compliance status, ensuring that only compliant and secure devices can access corporate resources. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge in balancing the need for enhanced security controls with the operational requirements and user experience within a Workspace ONE managed environment. The challenge lies in identifying and implementing solutions that are both effective against emerging threats and compliant with organizational policies and potentially relevant data privacy regulations, without causing undue disruption. Careful judgment is required to assess the risk appetite of the organization and the impact of proposed controls on end users and business processes. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a comprehensive, risk-based strategy. By engaging stakeholders, understanding the threat landscape, and evaluating potential solutions against defined criteria, the IT team ensures that any implemented controls are aligned with business objectives and security posture. This proactive and collaborative method minimizes the likelihood of introducing vulnerabilities or negatively impacting productivity, while also ensuring that the chosen solution is sustainable and auditable. This aligns with the principles of responsible IT governance and security management, which emphasize due diligence and informed decision-making. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on deploying a new security feature without proper assessment or stakeholder consultation would be professionally unacceptable. This could lead to significant operational disruption, user frustration, and potential noncompliance if the feature inadvertently violates existing policies or data handling requirements. For instance, implementing a blanket device encryption policy without considering device compatibility or user data access needs could render critical applications unusable, leading to productivity loss and potential data access issues. Furthermore, bypassing the change management process and failing to document the implementation would create an audit trail deficiency, making it difficult to demonstrate compliance or troubleshoot issues. Another incorrect approach that involves selecting a solution based on vendor marketing alone, without validating its efficacy or suitability for the specific environment, is also professionally unsound. This can result in wasted resources, a false sense of security, and the potential introduction of new risks if the solution is not robust or compatible with existing infrastructure. Relying on a solution that has not been thoroughly tested or vetted against the organization's unique threat profile and technical environment is a failure of due diligence. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Identify the problem or opportunity. Clearly define the security concern or the need for an enhancement. 2. Engage stakeholders. Involve relevant parties, e.g., security, IT operations, business units, end users, to gather requirements and understand impacts. 3. Assess the threat landscape and risk. Understand the specific threats the organization faces and its risk tolerance. 4. Research and evaluate potential solutions. Explore available technologies and their capabilities, considering factors like integration, scalability, and management overhead. 5. Develop a pilot or proof of concept. Test promising solutions in a controlled environment to validate their effectiveness and impact. 6. Plan and implement. Develop a detailed deployment plan, including change management, user communication, and rollback procedures. 7. Monitor and optimize. Continuously assess the effectiveness of the implemented solution and make adjustments as needed. Question 18. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new Workspace ONE feature offers significant improvements in end-user productivity and device management efficiency, but it involves processing user data in a manner that is not explicitly covered by current compliance documentation. What is the most prudent course of action? Option A. Conduct a thorough security and compliance review, engaging legal and data privacy teams to assess the feature's alignment with all applicable regulations and internal policies before proceeding with implementation. Option B. Delay the decision to implement the feature indefinitely until a perfect, risk-free solution that meets all current and future compliance requirements can be identified. Option C. Rely on the vendor's assurances regarding data handling and compliance, and implement the feature to leverage its advertised benefits without further internal scrutiny. Option D. Proceed with the implementation of the feature to realize the immediate productivity gains, and address any potential compliance issues that may arise retrospectively. The correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough security and compliance review, engaging legal and data privacy teams to assess the feature's alignment with all applicable regulations and internal policies before proceeding with implementation. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT management, balancing the immediate benefits of a new technology with the long-term implications for security and compliance. A professional is tasked with evaluating a proposed Workspace ONE feature that promises enhanced user experience, but introduces a new data handling mechanism. The challenge lies in discerning whether the perceived benefits outweigh the potential risks, especially when those risks touch upon data privacy and regulatory adherence. Careful judgment is required to avoid a hasty decision that could lead to significant compliance issues or security vulnerabilities. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough risk assessment aligned with established security principles and the specific regulatory framework governing data handling. By engaging relevant stakeholders, including legal and compliance teams, the professional ensures that the decision is not made in a vacuum, but considers all facets of the organization's obligations. This proactive engagement is crucial for maintaining compliance with data protection regulations, which often mandate specific controls and reporting mechanisms for sensitive information. The focus on understanding the data flow, potential exposure, and the effectiveness of proposed mitigation strategies demonstrates a commitment to responsible technology adoption. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the immediate user experience, benefits without a comprehensive security and compliance review, fails to uphold professional responsibility. This oversight could lead to violations of data privacy laws, such as those requiring explicit consent for data processing or mandating data minimization. Another incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or the vendor's assurances without independent verification bypasses critical due diligence. This can result in the adoption of solutions that do not meet the organization's specific security posture or regulatory requirements, potentially exposing the organization to data breaches and subsequent legal repercussions. A third incorrect approach that delays the security and compliance review until after implementation introduces significant risk, as remediation efforts after a breach or noncompliance discovery are far more costly and damaging than proactive assessment. This reactive stance is fundamentally at odds with best practices in cybersecurity and regulatory adherence. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the problem and objectives. This is followed by identifying and evaluating all potential solutions, including the proposed feature. A critical step involves a comprehensive risk assessment, considering technical, security, and compliance implications. This assessment should involve input from all relevant departments, such as IT security, legal, and compliance. The framework then moves to evaluating the feasibility and impact of each solution against defined criteria, including cost, benefit, risk, and compliance. Finally, a documented decision, with clear rationale and mitigation plans for any identified risks, should be made and communicated. Question 19. The risk matrix shows a high likelihood of unauthorized access to sensitive customer data within the Workspace ONE environment, with potential for significant regulatory fines and reputational damage. The IT security team has identified a specific set of user accounts exhibiting anomalous login patterns. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to address this suspected security incident? Adhering to a strict regulatory framework that mandates data protection and documented incident response. Option A. Wipe and reimage all servers and endpoints associated with the identified user accounts to ensure complete removal of any potential threat. Option B. Immediately disable the identified user accounts and initiate a forensic investigation of the affected systems to determine the scope and nature of the potential breach. Documenting all actions taken. Option C. Proceed with a full, comprehensive risk assessment of the entire Workspace ONE infrastructure before taking any action, to ensure all potential vulnerabilities are understood. Option D. Notify all customers immediately about the potential data breach, without first confirming the extent of the compromise or the specific data affected. The correct answer is B. Immediately disable the identified user accounts and initiate a forensic investigation of the affected systems to determine the scope and nature of the potential breach, documenting all actions taken. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT security and compliance, balancing operational efficiency with the stringent requirements of data privacy regulations. The organization is facing a potential breach, which immediately triggers a need for swift action. However, the specific regulatory framework for this exam, which is assumed to be a hypothetical jurisdiction for the purpose of 2V0-6221, mandates a structured and documented approach to incident response and data handling. The professional challenge lies in the tension between the urgency of containing a suspected breach and the need to adhere to established protocols that ensure data integrity, legal compliance, and auditability. The correct approach prioritizes immediate containment and assessment within the defined regulatory boundaries. This involves isolating affected systems and initiating a documented investigation to determine the scope and nature of the incident. This aligns with best practices for incident response, which emphasize minimizing damage, preserving evidence, and understanding the impact before taking irreversible actions. Crucially, it respects the regulatory framework's emphasis on data protection and breach notification procedures, ensuring that any subsequent actions are informed and compliant. This approach demonstrates professional responsibility by adhering to established governance and risk management principles. An incorrect approach that involves immediately wiping all affected systems without proper investigation or documentation would be a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This action, while seemingly decisive, bypasses the mandated investigative steps, potentially destroying crucial evidence needed for forensic analysis and regulatory reporting. It also risks violating data retention policies and could lead to the accidental deletion of non-compromised data, causing operational disruption and potential legal liabilities. Furthermore, it fails to meet the likely requirements of the regulatory framework for a thorough and documented incident response, which would be a critical audit failure. Another incorrect approach, such as delaying any action until a full, formal risk assessment is completed is also professionally unacceptable. While risk assessment is vital, in a suspected breach scenario, such a delay could allow the incident to escalate, leading to greater data compromise and more severe regulatory penalties. The regulatory framework likely expects a tiered response, where immediate containment measures are initiated based on a preliminary assessment of risk, followed by more detailed analysis. This approach demonstrates a lack of understanding of incident response urgency and a failure to apply risk management principles dynamically. The professional decision-making process in such situations should follow a framework that includes 1. Immediate threat assessment and containment. 2. Adherence to established incident response playbooks and regulatory guidelines. 3. Evidence preservation. 4. Thorough investigation and analysis. 5. Appropriate remediation and recovery. And 6. Comprehensive documentation for audit and reporting. Professionals must be trained on the specific regulatory requirements and have clear escalation paths and predefined actions for various incident types. Question 20. Which approach would be most appropriate for an IT administrator to take when a business unit requests the immediate deployment of a new Workspace ONE feature that has not yet undergone a formal security risk assessment, given the organization's adherence to U.S. regulatory frameworks for data security? Option A. Deploy the feature with minimal security configurations enabled, relying on existing network security measures to protect the environment. Option B. Initiate a rapid but thorough security risk assessment for the new feature, involving the security team, and propose a phased rollout with interim security controls if immediate full deployment is deemed too risky. Option C. Inform the business unit that the feature cannot be deployed until a full, multi-month security audit is completed, regardless of the feature's potential business benefits. Option D. Proceed with the deployment immediately to meet the business unit's urgent request, assuming the feature has been vetted by the vendor. The correct answer is D. Proceed with the deployment immediately to meet the business unit's urgent request, assuming the feature has been vetted by the vendor. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in IT administration, balancing the immediate need for a new feature with the established security and compliance protocols. The organization is operating under the regulatory framework of the United States, specifically as it pertains to data privacy and security standards relevant to enterprise software deployments. The challenge lies in the potential conflict between the business unit's desire for rapid deployment of a new Workspace ONE feature and the IT security team's mandate to ensure all new deployments adhere to existing security policies and undergo a thorough risk assessment. Failure to properly assess the security implications of a new feature could lead to vulnerabilities, data breaches, or noncompliance with regulations like HIPAA or GDPR, if applicable to the data handled, resulting in significant financial penalties and reputational damage. The correct approach involves a structured, risk-based decision-making process that prioritizes security and compliance without completely stifling innovation. This aligns with best professional practices in IT governance and cybersecurity. It ensures that new technologies are integrated in a controlled and secure manner, minimizing potential threats. This approach is professionally sound because it demonstrates due diligence, adherence to established security frameworks, e.g., NIST Cybersecurity Framework, and a commitment to protecting organizational data and user privacy. It also fosters collaboration between business and IT, ensuring that technology decisions are aligned with both business objectives and risk management strategies. An incorrect approach would be to bypass the security review process entirely to meet the business unit's deadline. This represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It directly violates the principle of least privilege and the requirement for robust security controls, potentially exposing sensitive data to unauthorized access or modification. Such an action could lead to noncompliance with data protection laws, resulting in severe penalties. Another incorrect approach would be to indefinitely delay the feature's deployment due to minor, easily mitigable security concerns without exploring alternative solutions or phased rollouts. This demonstrates a lack of agility and a failure to balance risk with business needs, potentially hindering operational efficiency and competitive advantage. Ethically, it fails to serve the organization's broader interests by creating unnecessary operational friction. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that includes 1. Understanding the business requirement and its urgency. 2. Identifying potential security and compliance risks associated with the proposed feature. 3. Consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations. 4. Collaborating with stakeholders, business units, security team, compliance officers, to assess risks and explore mitigation strategies. 5. Documenting the risk assessment and the decision-making process. 6. Implementing approved solutions with appropriate controls and ongoing monitoring. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with organizational objectives and regulatory obligations.